Well, hello, my spooky friends. Sometimes Scully and I have a bit of a problem going to sleep, so we tell each other ghost stories. And I thought maybe you would like to hear them too. Let me know how you enjoy these and if they help you go to sleep. All right, it's time now for Lights Out. Are you ready? The old manor stood on a hill overlooking the town, its darkened windows like eyes staring into the souls of those who dared to look back. For generations, locals had whispered tales of the Grey Lady, the spectral resident said to roam its decaying halls. Elias, a historian with a penchant for the macabre, had purchased the manor for a pittance, eager to uncover its secrets. He was a man of logic, a skeptic at heart, but the persistent rumors and the sheer oppressive atmosphere of the house had begun to wear at his resolve. His first few nights were uneventful, filled only with the creaks and groans of an old house settling. He spent his days poring over dusty ledgers and forgotten diaries found in the manor's library, searching for any mention of the Grey Lady or the source of the legends. It was on the fifth night that things began to change. A cold spot developed in his study, a chill that no amount of firewood could dispel. Then came the whispers, faint at first, like the rustling of silk, just at the edge of hearing. Elias tried to dismiss them as the wind or perhaps mice in the walls, but a knot of unease tightened in his stomach. One evening, while working late in the study, a book suddenly flew from a high shelf, landing open on his desk. The pages were brittle with age, the ink faded, but the entry was clear. It was a diary, penned by a former governess of the manor, dated over a century ago. It spoke of Lady Annalise, the young wife of the manor's then owner, who had vanished without a trace. The governess wrote of Annalise's melancholy, her long solitary walks through the gardens, and her husband's growing cruelty. The last entry described a terrible argument, followed by an eerie silence that had enveloped the house. As Elias read, the temperature in the room plummeted. The whispers grew louder, coalescing into a mournful sigh that seemed to emanate from the very walls. He looked up, his heart pounding, to see a translucent figure standing in the doorway. It was a woman, clad in a flowing gray gown, her features indistinct, but her sorrow palpable. The Grey Lady. Elias, despite his fear, felt a surge of empathy. This was not a malevolent spirit, but a tormented one. Annalise, he whispered, his voice trembling slightly. The figure drifted closer, and for a moment he could almost make out her face, young, beautiful, and etched with an unbearable sadness. She raised a spectral hand, pointing towards the fireplace. Then, as quickly as she had appeared, she faded away, leaving Elias alone in the chilling silence. His skepticism had vanished, replaced by a compelling need to understand. The next morning, he examined the fireplace. It was an ornate stone structure, clearly very old. Behind the heavy iron gate, he noticed a section of stonework that seemed newer than the rest. With considerable effort, he managed to pry the stones loose. Behind them, he found a small hidden alcove, and within it a small leather-bound journal and a tarnished silver locket. The journal was Annalise's. Her elegant script detailed her unhappy marriage, her husband's possessiveness, and her desperate longing for freedom. She wrote of a secret plan to escape, of a trusted friend in the nearby village who was to help her. The last entry was hurried, fearful, Her husband had discovered her plan. The locket contained a miniature portrait of a smiling woman, Annalise. Elias knew then what he had to do. The whispers, the cold spots, the gray lady's appearance. It was all a desperate plea for her story to be told, for the truth of her demise to be brought to light. Elias contacted the local historical society, presenting them with the diaries and the locket. He told them of his experiences of the Gray Lady's sorrowful apparition. The story of Lady Annalise, once a whispered legend, became a documented tragedy. Her husband, it was discovered through further research prompted by Elias's findings, had been a man of considerable influence and a cruel nature. While no definitive proof of his direct involvement in her disappearance was ever found in official records, the weight of Annalise's own words and the spectral evidence Elias provided painted a grim picture. The manor, no longer just a source of spooky tales, became a place of historical interest, a solemn reminder of the life cut short. And the Gray Lady? She was never seen again. Perhaps with her story finally told, Lady Annalise had found her peace. Elias continued to live in the manor, no longer a skeptic, but a guardian of its history, forever changed by the silent sorrow of the Gray Lady. The email arrived on a Tuesday, unassuming amidst the usual spam and work notifications. Subject: regarding the old Henderson Place. Liam almost deleted it, assuming it was another attempt to sell him something related to the small, dilapidated farmhouse he'd inherited from a great aunt he'd never met. But something made him click. The sender was a concerned neighbor, no name given. "Mr. Davis," it began, "I don't wish to alarm you, but since you're the new owner of the Henderson Place, I feel it's my duty to inform you of certain occurrences. Things have been unsettled. Lights at odd hours, sounds, nothing I can rightly explain. Perhaps you might look into it when you have a moment." Liam, a software developer with a stubbornly logical mind, scoffed. Teenagers, probably, or squatters. He'd been meaning to drive out to the property, located a good 3 hours from the city, to assess its value, or lack thereof. This email, as vague and slightly unhinged as it sounded, provided the necessary nudge. He drove out the following Saturday. The Henderson Place was even more run down than the photos suggested. Peeling paint, a sagging porch, and windows like vacant eyes. The air was still, the silence broken only by the rustle of dry leaves. He found the key under a loose stone, just as his great-aunt's solicitor had described. Inside it smelled of dust, disuse, and a faint, unidentifiable mustiness. He spent the afternoon taking inventory, making notes. Structurally, it wasn't a complete disaster, but it would need a lot of work. As dusk began to settle, casting long, eerie shadows, he decided to stay the night. He'd brought a sleeping bag and some supplies, curious to see if he'd witnessed any of these unsettled things himself. He made a simple dinner on a camping stove and read by flashlight. The house creaked and groaned, as old houses do. He told himself it was the wind, the house settling. Around midnight, he was drifting off to sleep in the main living room when he heard it. A distinct, soft thud from upstairs, like something being gently set down on a wooden floor. His heart rate quickened. He wasn't expecting visitors, and the nearest neighbor was a good half-mile away. He grabbed his heavy-duty flashlight, his knuckles white as he gripped it. "Hello?" he called out, his voice sounding thin in the oppressive silence. No response. He moved slowly toward the staircase, each creak of the floorboards under his feet amplifying the tension. Upstairs there were 2 bedrooms and a small, dusty bathroom. He checked the first bedroom. Empty, save for a rickety old wardrobe and a broken chair. He moved to the second, the one directly above where he had been sleeping. As he pushed the door open, a waft of cold air hit him, colder than the rest of the house, and the smell, that faint, musty odor, but stronger here with an added sweetness, like old dried flowers. The room was bare except for a single child-sized wooden rocking chair in the center. It was rocking, gently, rhythmically, as if someone had just vacated it. Liam caught his breath. He scanned the room with his flashlight. No open windows, no drafts he could detect. The rocking continued for a few more seconds, then slowly, gradually came to a stop. He stood frozen, his mind racing for a rational explanation. Vibrations from his footsteps? The house settling unevenly? But it had seemed so deliberate. He backed out of the room, a prickling sensation on his skin. He didn't sleep much more that night. Every creak, every rustle of leaves outside sent his nerves jangling. He kept replaying the image of the rocking chair, the inexplicable coldness, the strange scent. In the morning, fueled by coffee and the bright light of day, his rational mind began to reassert itself. He examined the rocking chair. It was old, certainly. He tried to make it rock by stomping on the floorboards. It wobbled, but it didn't replicate the smooth, consistent motion he'd witnessed. He checked for drafts again, meticulously. Nothing. He spent the rest of the day cleaning, trying to air out the musty smell. He found a box of old photographs in the attic, pictures of his great-aunt, younger, with a man he assumed was her husband, and a few of a little girl, maybe 5 or 6 years old, with wide, serious eyes. He didn't recognize her. There were no names on the back of the photos. That night, he set up a small digital camera with motion detection in the upstairs bedroom, focused on the rocking chair. He also left a digital voice recorder running. He was determined to get to the bottom of this, to find a logical explanation for what he was experiencing, or at least to document it. He slept fitfully downstairs. Just before dawn, he was jolted awake by a series of soft, distinct taps. Tap, tap, tap. They seemed to be coming from the wall beside him. He held his breath, listening. Tap, tap, tap. It was a pattern, almost like a hesitant knock. Then silence. He waited until full daylight before going upstairs. The rocking chair was still. He checked the camera. It had recorded several clips. The first few showed nothing but the empty room. Then, around 3:17 a.m., the chair began to rock. Slowly at first, then with more energy, as if an invisible child were playing in it. No one entered the frame. No visible force acted upon it. It rocked for nearly 10 minutes before gradually slowing to a stop. His blood ran cold watching it. He listened to the audio recording. Hours of silence, the occasional creak of the house. Then around the time he had heard the taps, the recorder picked them up too. Faint, but undeniably there. And then something else. A whisper. So faint he almost missed it. He had to amplify the audio on his laptop. A child's voice, it sounded like, sang a single word. Play? Liam felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature of the old house. This wasn't teenagers. This wasn't squatters. He couldn't explain the rocking chair, the cold spots, the smells, the taps, the whispered word. His logical mind was struggling but failing to find an answer. He packed his things, his hands trembling slightly. He didn't know what was in that house, but he knew he didn't want to stay another night. He drove back to the city, the images and sounds replaying in his mind. He thought about the email from the concerned neighbor. He thought about the little girl and the photographs. He never went back to the Henderson Place. He put it on the market, sold it as is for a fraction of its potential value to a developer who planned to tear it down. He never mentioned the rocking chair or the whisper, but sometimes late at night, when his apartment is quiet, he thinks he can almost hear a faint tapping sound. Or is it just the old building settling? He tries to tell himself it is. But the memory of that cold room and the small, hopeful whisper of play lingers, a quiet, unsettling echo in the back of his mind. The lighthouse keeper, old Silas, had vanished. Not a trace was left save for the lingering scent of brine and an unsettling quiet that had fallen over the craggy island of Oakhaven. Clara, a young journalist eager to make her mark, arrived on the ferry, her notebook clutched tight against the biting sea wind. The islanders were tight-lipped, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and a strange, almost reverent respect for the sea and its mysteries. They spoke in hushed tones of the song of the deep, a melody said to lure sailors to their watery graves, a song Silas had claimed to hear in the nights leading up to his disappearance. Clara secured lodging at the island's only inn, a creaking, salt-weathered establishment run by a stoic woman named Martha, whose eyes held the wisdom of the tides. Martha warned Clara against venturing to the lighthouse after dark, her voice low and serious. Some things are best left undisturbed. The sea keeps its own counsel. Undeterred, Clara spent her first day interviewing the locals. Fishermen spoke of the strange lights seen flickering around the lighthouse on the night Silas vanished. The postman recalled Silas's increasingly erratic behavior, his talk of whispers from the waves, and a woman's voice calling his name. The tales were a tapestry of folklore and fear, but Clara sensed an underlying truth, a genuine terror that gripped the small community. That evening, armed with a heavy flashlight and a healthy dose of doubt, Clara made her way toward the lighthouse. The path was treacherous, winding along cliff edges with the churning sea roaring below. The lighthouse itself stood as a solitary sentinel, its beam cutting a swath through the encroaching darkness. The door was unlocked, groaning open with a sound like a dying breath. Inside, the air was cold and heavy, with the smell of damp stone and something else, something faintly metallic and unsettling, like old blood. Dust lay thick on every surface, disturbed only by a single set of footprints leading toward the spiral staircase. Silas's, presumably. Clara followed them, her own footsteps echoing unnervingly in the silence. The lamp room at the top was surprisingly clean, the great lens gleaming. A logbook lay open on a small desk. Silas's entries, usually meticulous and mundane, had become increasingly frantic in the final days. He wrote of the song, describing it as beautiful and terrifying, a melody that promised oblivion and peace. He mentioned a woman, her hair like seaweed, her eyes like pearls, beckoning him from the waves. The last entry was a single scrawled sentence. "She's waiting. I must go to her." A sudden gust of wind slammed the lamp room door shut, plunging Clara into darkness, save for the rhythmic sweep of the beam. Her flashlight clattered to the floor, its light extinguished. Panic seized her. Then she heard it, a faint ethereal melody, seeming to rise from the sea itself. It was hauntingly beautiful, yet filled with an ineffable sadness and a chilling undercurrent of menace. It seemed to vibrate in her very bones, tugging at some primal part of her. Clara fumbled for the door handle, her breath catching in her throat. As her fingers closed around the cold metal, she saw a flicker of movement out on the narrow walkway that encircled the lamp room. A figure stood there, silhouetted against the stormy sky. It was a woman, her form indistinct, her hair swirling in the wind like dark water. She seemed to be beckoning, her head tilted as if listening to the same unearthly song. Clara's journalistic instincts warred with a raw, instinctual fear. She forced herself to call out, "Silas, is that you? Who's out there?" The figure didn't respond, but the song grew louder, more insistent. Clara felt a strange compulsion to open the door, to step out onto the walkway, to get closer to the source of the melody. It was a siren's call, promising answers, promising something else. With a supreme effort of will, she backed away from the door, her heart hammering. She remembered Martha's warning, and she stumbled back towards the stairs, her hands grappling for purchase in the dark. The song followed her, seeping through the stone walls, its notes twisting into something that sounded like mournful laughter. She half fell, half ran down the spiral staircase, bursting out of the lighthouse and into the relative safety of a stormy night. She didn't stop running until she reached the inn, her lungs burning, the haunting melody still echoing in her ears. Martha was waiting, a knowing look in her ancient eyes. She simply nodded as Clara, gasping for breath, recounted her experience. "The sea has many voices," Martha said softly, pouring Clara a cup of strong, hot tea. Silas heard one he couldn't ignore. "It seems you almost did, too." Clara stayed on Oak Haven for another week, but she didn't go near the lighthouse again. She wrote her article not as a sensationalist ghost story, but as a tale of a small community's relationship with the vast, unknowable power of the sea and the mysteries it held. She wrote of Silas, not as a madman, but as a man who had perhaps become too attuned to the island's ancient rhythms, a man who had answered a call that the others only dimly perceived. The song of the deep was never fully explained. Some said it was the wind playing tricks through the rocks. Others whispered of an ancient sea spirit, a lonely guardian of the depths. Clara left Oak Haven with more questions than answers, but with a profound respect for the things that lay beyond human understanding. And sometimes, on quiet nights, when the wind was just right, she thought she could still hear the faint, haunting strains of that melody, a reminder of the night she almost answered the sea's call. Well, that's it for tonight. I hope you enjoyed these stories, and as always, whatever you do, just stay spooky. Bye-bye.